Ever feel like you're stuck waiting for a slow transaction on the blockchain superhighway? Well, today's deep dive, we're talking Conflux Network. They're putting the pedal to the metal with this one, listeners, talking speed and efficiency and a whole new way of handling data.
Conflux isn't just giving the old blockchain model a new paint job. It's more like they're going under the hood, straight to the source code to rethink how we pay for transactions and store data.
So, no more watching my crypto slowly disappear as fees while I wait for a transaction to go through.
Exactly. And to really understand what they're doing, we're going deep into their economics paper, Conflux Network, engineering, and economic design. It's like their master plan for making Conflux a real player in the blockchain space.
Okay, I'm listening. But before we get lost in the details, give me the quick pitch. Why should I, as someone who knows a thing or two about blockchain, be excited about Conflux?
Because Conflux is tackling the big problems head on. They're looking at the incentives for both the people using the blockchain and the miners, which could lead to blockchain technology that's faster, cheaper, and easier for everyone to use.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. Real-world benefits, that's what matters. So how does Conflux actually deliver on these promises? What's the secret ingredient in their recipe?
One key thing is how they approach storage. See, some blockchains are like a digital hoarder's paradise. People can just abandon unused data, clogging everything up and slowing the whole network down.
Like leaving a trail of digital junk drawers. Not exactly efficient.
You said it. Conflux is putting its foot down and saying, no more digital pack rats. They've brought in a system where you pay for storage space continuously. So now users have to be more mindful about what they're storing, like cleaning up after themselves in the digital world. Less digital clutter, more efficiency. I can get behind that. But what's in it for the miners? How does this whole storage system benefit them?
Now that's where it gets really neat. Those storage fees aren't just disappearing, they're converted into passive income for the miners. Think of it like owning digital real estate and collecting rent.
So miners are incentivized to keep things running smoothly because a well-maintained network means more storage fees for them, more digital tenants, more rent money. Exactly, and it goes beyond just storage. Complex has another trick up its sleeve when it comes to making their network more appealing to miners. They're trying to fix a problem we call the winner-takes-all dilemma.
Okay, break that down for me. Winner takes all. What does that mean in the context of blockchain, and how does Conflux fix it?
Imagine a race where a bunch of miners are trying to solve a really complex puzzle, and only the first one to crack the code gets the reward. Everyone else gets nothing. That's how a lot of blockchains work.
So it's like a high-stakes, high-reward lottery.
Right. Conflux is changing things up. Their system rewards miners for every valid block they find, not just the ones that make it onto the main chain.
Wait, so even if they're not the first to solve the puzzle, they still get something?
Exactly. This encourages miners to work together and share resources instead of fighting each other for scraps. Makes the whole network more stable, too.
This is really different. It's like they took the traditional blockchain rulebook and said, nope, we're doing it our way.
It's definitely a bold strategy, but they argue, pretty convincingly in their paper, that it could make the network more secure and resilient.
Okay, so they're encouraging people to use storage efficiently, rewarding miners for collaboration and security. But what about Conflux itself? How do they make money? Let's talk about those CFX tokens.
Right, the CFX token, that's the fuel for the whole Conflux engine. It's what users spend on transactions, storage, and it even gives them a voice in deciding the future of the Conflux network.
A voice. So it's more than just a currency. It's like a membership with voting rights.
Precisely. And they've been pretty strategic about how these CFX tokens are distributed. They've set aside a chunk to encourage early adopters, the developers making cool things on Conflux. And they even have this system where investors' tokens become available gradually, linked to how much CFX is worth.
Hold on. This sounds more like Wall Street than a typical blockchain project. This whole token system seems very, how do you say, sophisticated?
You could say that. They have these built-in mechanisms to help manage the token's price and make sure inflation stays in check. And all of this circles back to how they get people to actually use the Conflux network.
It all sounds good on paper, but will it actually work in the real world? Can a blockchain really be fast, cheap, and secure? Can they really have it all?
That's the big question, isn't it? But here's the thing. Conflux didn't just throw a bunch of ideas at the wall and hope for the best. They've actually built these detailed models they try to predict how many people will use Conflux, how much transaction fees will be, even how much computing power miners will be willing to put in.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks. What kind of returns are we talking about here? Paint me a picture with numbers.
Well, they're projecting that Even with reasonable, not sky-high, transaction fees, the Conflux network could generate a good amount of daily revenue for those miners. Potentially, we're talking even exceeding what's possible on Ethereum down the line.
Okay, now you've got my full attention. Tell me more.
They're really aiming for an incredibly high number of transactions per second. I'm talking speeds that would blow what Ethereum can do today out of the water.
And they think they can actually pull that off.
That's the plan. They have this consensus algorithm called tree graph, which they say can handle way more transactions than the usual blockchains. Imagine going from a dirt road to a superhighway for data.
So this tree graph is their secret weapon.
You could say that they're betting big on it. And it's not just about simple transactions. Their vision is for Conflux to be the foundation for all sorts of super complex, decentralized applications.
Which is where those storage fees and miner rewards come into play, right?
Exactly. They're trying to create this ecosystem where it's actually profitable for miners to provide the resources to support all this activity. And of course, they need developers to jump on board and build amazing apps on the Conflux platform.
It's like they're trying to orchestrate this complex dance where the technology, the economics, the developers, the users, they all have to move in sync.
It's definitely intricate, but their model suggests that if they can get all those pieces working together, the rewards could be huge. Not just for the miners, but for anyone who believes in the power of this technology.
It's an exciting vision, that's for sure. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to dive a little deeper into these economic forecasts.
I agree. Their paper actually outlines a few different scenarios, taking into account things like user adoption rates, transaction fees, even the potential for someone trying to attack the network. It's a fascinating look at how they're thinking about Conflux's long-term survival.
Well, luckily for our listeners, we have you here to walk us through it all. So let's get down to business, shall we? What are some of their key assumptions, and how do those assumptions affect their projections?
Let's start with their model for how quickly users will adopt Conflux. Predicting how fast a new blockchain will catch on is like trying to predict the weather. It's notoriously difficult.
Especially since there's always a new blockchain popping up claiming to be the next big thing.
You said it. So Conflux has looked to the past for guidance. They've been analyzing the growth of Ethereum, which makes sense because they're both going after similar users and use cases.
So they're using Ethereum as a benchmark, like a point of comparison.
Exactly. They've looked at how long it took Ethereum to gain traction, how quickly people started using it for transactions, what factors influence its growth. Then they've used that data to model how Conflux might grow.
So what's the verdict? Slow and steady, or a meteoric rise to the top?
Well, they've modeled a few different possibilities, ranging from a more conservative estimate that mirrors Ethereum's path to some more optimistic scenarios where Conflux takes off much faster.
And what are some of the key factors that determine which scenario is more likely to play out?
One thing that's absolutely essential is developer activity. They need talented developers to build those killer apps on Conflux, the ones everyone's going to be talking about.
It's like they're building a city. You need those big, exciting attractions to make people want to live there.
You got it. Another key factor is the overall mood towards blockchain. If we see a surge of interest and investment in blockchain in general, Conflux will probably benefit.
So their success isn't entirely in their own hands. A lot of it depends on things outside their control, like the overall health of the blockchain market.
That's just the nature of any new technology. But what's important is that Conflux isn't just sitting back hoping for the best. They're actively trying to build a strong developer community and make sure people know about their technology.
They're putting their money where their mouth is. What are some of the things they're doing?
Well, they have a program that gives funding to promising app projects being built on Conflux. Plus, they're organizing hackathons and developer conferences to bring the brightest minds together.
Smart move. Get the developers on board early and let them build the future of Conflux. But let's not forget about the competition. Conflux isn't the only player in the blockchain game, right? How are they going to compete with the big dogs like Ethereum and all the new blockchains that seem to be popping up every day?
That's the big question, and it's something they address directly in their paper. They know the blockchain space is getting crowded, but they believe they have a few key advantages that set them apart.
Oh, so what are these killer features that make Conflux different?
First, there's that tree graph technology we were talking about. That's a game changer in terms of how fast and efficient it is. We're talking about handling way more transactions per second than a lot of their competitors.
And in today's world, speed is everything. No one wants to wait around for a transaction to go through.
Absolutely. Second, they've made Conflux very developer-friendly. Programmers who already know how to code on Ethereum can easily transfer their skills to Conflux. They don't have to start from scratch.
Makes sense. The easier you make it for developers, the more likely they are to choose your platform.
Exactly. And finally, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They want to create a broad ecosystem that can support all sorts of applications and use cases.
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like they've really done their research, they know the challenges, and they've come up with some innovative solutions.
Definitely. They've put forward a pretty compelling case in their paper. But of course, the real test is whether they can execute on their vision.
Actions speak louder than words, as they say. But before we pass judgment, we need to talk about the miners. Specifically, how does Conflux ensure that it's actually profitable to be a miner on their network?
Absolutely, we need to talk about miner revenue. After all, a blockchain is only as strong as its network of miners.
Right, happy miners, strong blockchain.
Mm.
So how does Conflux plan to keep those digital miners digging for gold?
Well, this is where things get really interesting because Conflux is proposing a whole new model for incentivizing miners.
Oh, I'm all ears. Tell me everything.
Conflux gets it. They know that to attract miners, they need to offer a good deal.
It's a business at the end of the day. Miners are in it to earn rewards.
Exactly. And those rewards are paid in CFX tokens. But Conflux isn't just relying on block rewards, which, as we know, can be a bit unpredictable. They're getting creative and introducing new ways for miners to earn.
Okay, I like where this is going. Give me the details.
Well, we've already touched on one, the interest that miners earn on those storage bonds. But it doesn't stop there. Conflux is also directing a portion of all those transaction fees to the miners.
So more transactions on the network mean more money for the miners.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
You got it. But they're taking it even further. They're implementing a system where miners get a cut of the fees, even for transactions that occur on what we call sidechains.
Sidechains. Now you're just throwing jargon at me. Explain it like I'm new to this whole blockchain thing.
Think of the main Conflux blockchain as a busy highway. Sidechains are like smaller, less congested roads that branch off from the main highway. They can process transactions faster and cheaper because they're handling a smaller volume of traffic.
Okay, I'm following you so far. But if transactions are happening on these sidechains, how do miners earn fees from them?
Conflux has designed it so that a portion of the fees generated on sidechains gets funneled back to the main chain and then distributed among all the miners.
So even though the transactions aren't directly happening on the main blockchain, miners still get a piece of the pie.
Precisely. It encourages miners to support the growth of the entire Conflux ecosystem.
It creates a win-win for everyone involved. Miners make more money, users get the benefit of faster, cheaper transactions, everyone's happy.
That's the idea. It's all about creating a sustainable system where everyone benefits from the network's success. And it's not just wishful thinking on their part. They've put a lot of thought into the math behind it all.
Okay, good to know they've done their homework. So they've considered storage utilization, transaction volume. What else?
They're also looking at the overall computing power of the network. It's all factored in. They've even modeled out different scenarios to show how changes to things like transaction volume or storage use would affect how much miners earn.
It's like you're playing chess, thinking several moves ahead.
They're definitely strategic. And that's one of the things that makes Conflux such an intriguing player in the blockchain space. They're not just building a technology, they're building a whole ecosystem, and they're doing it with a focus on long-term sustainability and fairness.
Well, from what we've discussed so far, Conflux is definitely ticking a lot of boxes. They have the technology, the vision, and from the looks of it, the economic model to potentially shake things up.
They're a force to be reckoned with. But as with any new technology, there are always going to be challenges and uncertainties ahead.
Very true. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore those challenges. We'll be talking about how Conflux plans to handle risks, their ideas for governance and decentralization, and any potential roadblocks they might encounter. All right, so before we get into all the amazing potential of Conflux, we need to talk about the potential downsides, right? I mean, no technology is perfect. What are some of the bumps in the road that Conflux might hit on this journey to blockchain revolution?
Well, one of the biggest ones, and this is something the whole blockchain world is grappling with, is regulation. Governments are still figuring out what to do with all this, how to regulate it, and that creates a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, it's tough. One minute they're all about it, the next minute they're slamming on the brakes with new rules.
Exactly. And that uncertainty makes it hard for companies and investors to make plans. They need some stability. Conflux is going to have to be very careful, make sure they're following the rules, but also try to push things forward.
A tough balancing act for sure. But okay, let's say they manage to navigate the regulatory landscape. What about the tech itself? Is there anything inherently risky or vulnerable in their tree graph system? Could someone, exploit it?
That's the big question, isn't it? And Conflux has definitely thought about it. They have a whole section in their paper where they analyze different ways someone might try to attack the network. They've run simulations of things like double spending attacks, even something called selfish mining attacks.
Now you're speaking my language. Let's break those down. First up, double spending. For anyone who doesn't know, what is that and how could it affect Conflux?
So imagine you buy something online with Bitcoin, but then before the network realizes it, you use that same Bitcoin to buy something else, like magic internet money.
Digital counterfeit cash.
Exactly. Now, on a normal blockchain, that's super hard to pull off because of how transactions are verified. But Conflux's system, with all the parallel processing, it could, theoretically at least, open up some new ways for that kind of attack to happen.
Okay, I see the concern. So what's Conflux doing about it?
Yeah.
How do they stop someone from going on a spending spree with the same CFX over and over?
They actually argue that their system is more secure against double spending than the traditional way. And the reason is that their consensus mechanism, the thing that decides which blocks get added to the chain, is designed to punish anyone who tries to cheat.
So if you try to double spend, you'll get caught and it'll cost you.
Big time. It wouldn't be worth it. The details are a bit technical, but the penalty is way bigger than any potential gains.
Okay, good to know. What about those selfish mining attacks you mentioned? What are those and how does Conflux handle them?
So selfish mining is when a miner, or a group of them working together, they try to game the system, to get more rewards for themselves. Not necessarily trying to steal anything, but still not playing fair.
So bending the rules a little to get ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a problem because it goes against the whole idea of a decentralized system.
Right, because if a few miners get too much control, it's not really decentralized anymore.
Exactly. Now, remember how we talked about how Conflux rewards miners for all the valid blocks they find, not just the ones that end up on the main chain? That actually helps a lot with this selfish mining problem.
Okay, remind me how that works again.
Well, if miners know they're going to get rewarded anyway, they're less likely to try and game the system. It removes a lot of the incentive to be selfish.
So it creates more of a we're all in this together kind of vibe.
Exactly. Cooperation instead of competition. And they've actually run tests, simulations, and it looks like their system is much more resistant to selfish mining than other blockchains.
Well, that's reassuring. Security is obviously crucial. But another thing that a lot of people care about in the blockchain world is decentralization. How does Conflux ensure that their network stays decentralized? That it doesn't just become, a playground for the big players with the most CFX?
It's a good question and a really important one. For Conflux, it all comes down to governance, how decisions are made.
Okay, so we're talking about who has a say in how Conflux develops and operates in the future.
Exactly, and Conflux's goal is to be as decentralized and democratic as possible. Their plan is to eventually move towards a DAO structure.
DAO, as in Decentralized Autonomous Organization. For those of us who need a refresher, can you explain what a DAO is and how it would work with Conflux?
Sure, imagine an organization where there's no boss, no CEO. Instead, every decision is made collectively by the community using a blockchain-based voting system. That's a DAO in a nutshell.
Sounds very democratic, but in the case of Conflux, wouldn't that mean people with a lot of CFX have all the power?
That's a risk, for sure, and it's something that Conflux is well aware of. They're looking into ways to balance things out to make sure that even those with smaller holdings still have a voice. One idea they're exploring is something called quadratic voting.
Quadratic voting. Now, that one's new to me. Break it down.
So it's a bit technical, but basically it's a way to give more voting power to smaller stakeholders, relatively speaking. So the whales, the big CFX holders, they'd still have a say, but their influence wouldn't be as overwhelming.
So a way to level the playing field and make sure everyone's voice is heard?
Exactly. Conflux really seems committed to building a decentralized and fair system. They know that's crucial if they want to succeed in the long run.
It's really interesting to see how Conflux is addressing these challenges head on. They're not shying away from the tough questions, and they seem genuinely dedicated to creating a better, more equitable digital future.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so we've talked about security, decentralization, but now let's talk about the heart of any blockchain, the incentives. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how Conflux ensures that it's actually rewarding to be a miner on their network. We'll be digging into the specifics of their innovative approach to miner rewards. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about how Conflux motivates their miners, makes sure it's worth their while to be a part of the network, and it sounds like they're doing things a bit differently.
Yeah, they're really trying to shake things up with their approach to miner rewards. It's not just about those basic block rewards that you see in a lot of other blockchains. They've got a more well-rounded system, you could say.
All right, I'm all ears. Let's break it down for our listeners. How do Conflux miners actually earn those rewards? What's their path to digital fortune?
So, there are three main ways Conflux miners can earn CFX tokens. Those are the rewards. You've got your block rewards, transaction fees, and storage fees.
Okay, let's take those one by one. Block rewards, those are pretty standard in the blockchain world, right?
Yeah, you see them everywhere, but Conflux has put their own spin on things. A lot of blockchains, it's like a race first miner to solve this complex puzzle. They get to add the next block to the chain and they get all the rewards. Everyone else, tough luck.
A high-stakes poker game, blockchain style.
Pretty much. But Conflux said, you know what, let's try something different. They actually reward miners for all the valid blocks they find, even if they don't end up on that main blockchain.
Wait, hold on. So even if a miner doesn't win the block race, they still get a prize?
Exactly. They get rewarded for their effort, even if they're not the first one across the finish line.
That's a pretty sweet deal for miners. But what's the thinking behind that? Why change things up?
Well, for one, it encourages collaboration. Instead of all the miners competing against each other, they're more likely to work together, share resources, because they know they'll be rewarded for their contribution either way.
So it's more like a team effort than a free-for-all.
Exactly. And that's better for the network as a whole, too. A more collaborative mining community means a more secure and stable blockchain.
Makes sense. There's strength in numbers, right?
hmm
But okay, enough about block rewards. What about transaction fees? How do those work on Conflux?
Well, like with most blockchains, whenever someone makes a transaction on Conflux, they have to pay a small fee. It's like a tiny toll they pay to use this super fast, efficient blockchain highway that Conflux is building.
So the more popular Conflux gets, the more transactions are happening, the more money those miners are making from those fees.
You got it. And remember how we talked about Conflux's tree graph technology, how it lets them process way more transactions than other blockchains? Well, that translates into more potential earnings for the miners. More transactions, more fees, everyone wins.
It's a win-win situation. Okay, we've covered block rewards, transaction fees, one more to go, storage fees. Remind us how those work.
Right. So Conflux charges users a fee to store data on the network, and a big chunk of those fees goes straight to, you guessed it, the miners.
Ah, so those storage fees, they're like a steady stream of passive income for miners, on top of the block rewards and transaction fees.
Exactly. It all adds up. Conflux wants to make sure that being a miner on their network is actually profitable, that there are multiple ways to earn rewards.
Smart move. Keep those miners happy. But it's not just about throwing money at the problem, right?
Yeah.
It seems like Conflux has put a lot of thought into creating a sustainable system, a system where everyone benefits.
Absolutely. And they haven't just made some rough estimates about how this is all going to work. They've modeled everything out in detail, how they calculate those rewards, how different factors like storage use and transaction volume will affect things. They've done their homework.
Music to my ears. I love a good, well-thought-out plan. But, as we've been saying throughout this deep dive, the blockchain world is full of surprises. No one can predict the future with 100% certainty.
Very true. But one thing's for sure. Conflux is an ambitious project. They've got a lot of smart people working on it, and they're asking all the right questions. Whether they ultimately succeed or not, they're definitely pushing the boundaries of what's possible with blockchain technology.
Absolutely. It's been fascinating exploring the Conflux Network with you, learning about their technology, their vision, and their unique approach to building a sustainable blockchain ecosystem.
My pleasure.
And listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about. Conflux is a prime example of how quickly the blockchain world is evolving. Who knows what the future holds? But one thing's for sure. It's going to be an exciting ride.